The Beast King had never bowed to anyone, not to priests, not to foreign rulers, not even when 3 armies surrounded his mountain fortress and demanded his surrender. Yet now, before hundreds of silent Lycan warriors, King Rowan Valehart stepped down from his black iron throne and lowered himself before a trembling human woman. Scarlet Arrington stood in the center of the great hall, wearing a torn white bridal gown. Melted snow darkened its hem. Her bare fingers had turned blue from the cold, and a jagged scar cut from her left temple across her cheek, disappearing beneath the silk at her collarbone. She had been sent north as an insult. A disposable daughter for a king rumored to devour his brides. Scarlet expected Rowan to tear out her throat. Instead, the moment his silver eyes found her scar, the color drained from his face. The enormous king stopped as though an invisible blade had pierced his chest. His hand trembled at his side. Somewhere behind Scarlet, a wolf released a low, broken whine. Rowan descended the last step, then his knees struck the stone. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. Scarlet stumbled backward. Every story she had heard about the Beast King told her to fear his claws, his temper, his hunger. None had warned her that he might look at her as though she were something sacred. "My king?" one of his generals whispered. Rowan did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on the scar Scarlet had spent her life hiding. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a grief 14 years old. "Who told you that Mark made you ugly?" 3 weeks earlier, Scarlet was kneeling beside the kitchen ledger at Iron Oak Keep, trying to understand how 40 sacks of winter grain had disappeared. "You counted wrong," Steward Mallory muttered. Scarlet ran one finger down the figures again. "No, the southern granary received 80 sacks. The kitchens recorded 32. 8 were sent to the garrison." Mallory frowned. "That leaves 40. "Exactly." The old steward glanced toward the kitchen door before lowering his voice. "Your father approved the inventory." "My father approved numbers placed in front of him." Scarlet turned the page and found 3 payments made to the same merchant under slightly different names. The signatures matched. So did the ink. Someone was stealing food while tenant families beyond the keep walls survived on boiled roots. Scarlet tore a narrow strip from an unused page and wrote the account numbers on it. "Move 20 sacks from the hunting lodge stores before tonight," she said. "Record them as spoiled wine barrels. No one audits the Duke's private cellar." Mallory stared at her. Scarlet lifted her veil higher over the left side of her face. "The village children need bread more than my father needs another banquet. You should have been managing this estate." A bitter smile touched her mouth. "Then it is fortunate no one has noticed that I already am." Footsteps approached. Scarlet closed the ledger and returned to the hearth just as Lady Beatrice entered the kitchen in a gown of pale gold. Her stepmother's gaze moved from the steward to Scarlet. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning the ashes." "Then keep your veil down. Lord Pembroke arrived this morning, and I will not have him wandering into the kitchen only to find that face staring back at him." Scarlet lowered her eyes. Beatrice smiled, satisfied. Behind her, Mallory quietly slipped the grain account into his coat. To the kingdom, Duke Cedric Arrington was a grieving widower and a defender of the northern marches. At dinner that evening, he spoke warmly about sacrifice while noble guests drank from silver cups beneath portraits of Scarlet's dead mother. "My first wife gave everything for this land," Cedric said. "Her courage remains the standard by which House Arrington lives." Scarlet stood behind Beatrice's chair, refilling wine like a servant. No one asked why the dead Duchess's eldest daughter was not seated at the table. Rosalind sat beside Cedric in blue silk, golden hair shining beneath the chandeliers. She laughed when Lord Pembroke praised her beauty and glanced towards Scarlet as though inviting comparison. Scarlet looked away. On the wall behind her hung a painting of her mother before the fatal journey north. Around the Duchess's throat was a silver medallion shaped like a wolf surrounded by winter roses. Scarlet had seen that symbol before. Not in the chapel, not on any Arrington banner. In a locked account book hidden beneath the eastern tower floor. Later, after the guests retired, Scarlet returned to the abandoned study where her mother's belongings had been stored. She pried up the loose floorboard and removed the small bundle she had hidden there. Inside lay the matching medallion. Its silver surface was cold against her palm. Beneath it rested half of a burned document bearing her mother's seal. Only one sentence remained readable. "The warden's blood shall inherit the marches, regardless of name or marriage." The door opened behind her. Cedric stood in the darkness. His expression did not change when he saw the document, but his eyes dropped to the medallion, and for the first time in Scarlet's life, she saw fear in her father's face. He crossed the room and tore both objects from her hands. "You will never enter this study again." "Why?" His fingers closed around her wrist. "Because your mother is dead," he said, "and dead women cannot give you anything." The royal decree arrived before dawn. A horn sounded from the outer gate, pulling the household from sleep. Scarlet watched from the upper landing as a mud-covered royal messenger entered the great hall carrying a sealed black scroll. Cedric broke the wax. His face hardened as he read. Beatrice gripped Rosalind's hand. "What does it say?" Cedric did not answer immediately. The messenger did. "By order of King Aldous, House Arrington will provide a daughter of noble blood to seal the winter treaty with Variel." The room went still. Everyone knew the stories. The Beast King demanded a bride. The Beast King consumed what he was given. Rosalind made a small choking sound. Beatrice snatched the decree from Cedric and read the final lines. "No, the king cannot ask this of us." "He can," Cedric said. "He means Rosalind." Scarlet stood unnoticed in the shadows above them, one hand pressed against her scar. Beatrice began to pace. There must be another family, another girl. The decree names House Arrington. "It says a daughter of the house," Beatrice whispered. She stopped. Slowly, her eyes lifted toward the staircase, towards Scarlet. The terror in Beatrice's face disappeared. In its place came a smile. "Cedric," she said softly, "it does not say which daughter." Beatrice's suggestion hung in the great hall like the edge of a blade. Cedric looked up at Scarlet. For years, his eyes had passed over her as though she were part of the stonework. Now he studied her carefully, and Scarlet understood that being noticed by her father was far more dangerous than being ignored. "The decree requires noble blood," Cedric said. "She has yours," Beatrice replied. "Unfortunately." Rosalind stared between them. "Father, you cannot be considering this." Cedric folded the royal decree. "The king requires a daughter of House Arrington. Scarlet is my eldest." Scarlet descended one step. "You told the court I was unfit to represent this family." "That can be corrected." The ease of his answer chilled her. Cedric had spent years describing her as fragile, disfigured, incapable of marriage or inheritance. But if changing that story saved Rosalind, he would rewrite Scarlet's entire existence before breakfast. "Rowan Valehart will know I was not the daughter the king intended," Scarlet said. "He demanded blood, not beauty." Beatrice's smile widened. Scarlet looked at her father. "They say he kills the women sent to him." Cedric approached until only one step separated them. His voice dropped so the messenger could not hear. "Then try, for once, to die usefully." Scarlet's hand tightened around the railing. The royal messenger shifted uneasily, but Cedric turned back to him wearing the solemn expression of a grieving patriot. "House Arrington accepts the burden," he announced. "My eldest daughter, Lady Scarlet Arrington, will travel to Variel as our lawful offering under the winter treaty." The messenger bowed. With those words, Cedric restored Scarlet publicly to the family he had erased her from, not because she was his daughter, because he had found a use for her death. By sunset, the castle had begun preparing Scarlet like a body for burial. Beatrice rejected every wool, gown, and fur-lined cloak brought from storage. She chose white silk instead, thin enough for a spring wedding and useless against the northern winter. "The Beast King demanded a bride," Beatrice said as servants tightened the laces. "We should at least make you resemble one from a distance." Scarlet looked at herself in the mirror. The gown was beautiful, The woman inside it looked pale and hollow, her scar stark against her skin. Beatrice lifted the familiar brown bottle from the dressing table. "Open your mouth." Scarlet did not move. The tonic had been part of her life since childhood. Beatrice claimed it softened scar tissue, though it had never changed the mark. It only left Scarlet exhausted and nauseated. "You will take it," Beatrice said. "I will not have you collapsing before you cross the border." Scarlet swallowed the bitter liquid. Beatrice watched until the last drop was gone, then tore the veil from Scarlet's hands. "No veil. Let Rowan see what House Arrington thinks of him." When she left, an elderly maid named Elspeth slipped into the chamber and locked the door. She had served Scarlet's mother, and was one of the few people who still spoke her name with affection. Elspeth pressed the silver medallion into Scarlet's palm. Scarlet stared at it. "My father took this. I took it back. He will punish you. He has punished this house for 14 years. Elspeth closed Scarlet's fingers around the wolf and winter roses. "Your mother once told me the marches belong to her blood, not her husband's name. Whatever waits in the north, do not let Cedric bury that truth with you." At dawn, Scarlet was placed in an open carriage guarded by 20 armed men. Cedric did not come to the courtyard. Beatrice stood beneath the archway wrapped in sable. Rosalind watched from the balcony, relief shining more brightly on her face than guilt. Captain Alaric mounted his horse beside the carriage. He was a broad-shouldered veteran with grey in his beard and no patience for noble ceremonies. "We ride until dark," he said. "Do not ask for special treatment." "I was not expecting any." His gaze touched her scar and quickly moved away. The gates opened. Scarlet left Iron Oak. Keep without a blessing, a farewell, or a single person willing to admit she might still be alive in a month. For 6 days, rain turned to sleet. Sleet became snow. The soldiers slept beneath heavy blankets while Scarlet curled beneath the carriage bench in her silk gown. She survived by wrapping old feed sacks around her legs and stealing warmth from stones heated near the campfire. On the 8th night, she woke to voices beyond the trees. Captain Alaric stood with his lieutenant beside a lantern. "Cedric's public order says we deliver her alive," the lieutenant whispered. Alaric held a second letter bearing the Duke's private seal. "And this one says that no witness is to return from Variel with her." Scarlet stopped breathing. Alaric stared into the flames. "We leave her at Bloodwood. If the wolves take her, the treaty is fulfilled and no one asks questions. And if they do not?" Alaric folded the letter. "Then the cold will." Scarlet lay awake until morning with the medallion clenched beneath her dress. The Beast King was no longer the only danger waiting at the end of the road. On the 12th day, the pines grew black and enormous. Bloodwood. The horses sensed it before the men did. They began to rear, foam gathering at their mouths. The forest had gone unnaturally silent. No birds, no wind, only the soft creak of leather and the frightened breathing of soldiers. Captain Alaric raised one hand. The column stopped. A low growl rolled through the trees. It was too deep to belong to any ordinary wolf. Steel hissed from scabbards. Scarlet pushed herself upright as shapes moved between the trunks. One pair of golden eyes appeared, then another, then 10 more. Dire wolves emerged from the forest, each nearly as tall as a horse. The soldiers broke. "Leave the carriage," someone screamed. Alaric wheeled his mount around. Men scattered behind him, whipping their terrified horses back down the road. Within seconds, Scarlet was alone. Snow settled on her bare shoulders. A massive grey wolf stepped toward the carriage. A scar crossed its muzzle, and intelligence burned in its molten eyes. Scarlet closed one hand around her mother's medallion. The wolf lifted its head. Its nostrils flared. Then every beast in the forest turned toward her. The grey wolf stopped beside the carriage. Scarlet pressed herself against the wooden seat, too weak to run and too cold to scream. The beast's head was large enough to fill the open doorway. Snow clung to the thick fur around its neck, and an old scar cut across its muzzle. Its golden eyes moved over her face. Then they fixed on the scar beneath her left temple. Scarlet waited for its jaws to open. Instead, the wolf lowered its head. For one impossible moment, she thought the creature was preparing to strike. Then its front legs bent, its enormous chest sinking into the snow. It was bowing. One by one, the other wolves followed. A dozen predators lowered themselves around the carriage, forming a silent circle. Their heads remained down, but their bodies faced outward, as though Scarlet were not prey-trapped among them, as though she was something they had been ordered to protect. The grey wolf lifted its nose again. Scarlet's fingers tightened around the medallion hidden beneath her gown. The silver warmed suddenly against her skin. The wolf's ears snapped forward. It stepped closer and sniffed near her collarbone, where the scar disappeared beneath the white silk. A low sound emerged from its throat, not a growl, but something almost wounded. Scarlet slowly pulled out the medallion. Moonlight caught the silver wolf surrounded by winter roses. The beast froze. Behind it, several wolves released soft whines. "What are you?" Scarlet whispered. The grey wolf turned its head toward the forest and gave a short command. Two smaller wolves rose and moved beside the carriage. They pressed their fur-covered bodies against Scarlet's legs, surrounding her with sudden heat. The grey wolf caught the hem of her gown gently between its teeth and tugged. It wanted her to follow. Scarlet looked down the empty road where Captain Alaric had abandoned her. Then she looked at the creatures her entire kingdom had called monsters. The wolves had shown her more mercy in 1 minute than her family had shown her in 14 years. She climbed from the carriage. The snow nearly swallowed her bare feet. Before she could fall, the wolves closed around her. They moved through bloodwood without sound. Scarlet walked between them, one hand buried in the grey wolf's fur to remain upright. The forest seemed endless, its ancient trees blocking the moon until only thin silver blades reached the ground. She had no idea how long they traveled. Her vision blurred. The bitter tonic burned in her stomach, and every breath scraped her throat. At last, torchlight appeared between the trees. Not orange fire, blue. A stone gate rose from the mountain, carved with wolves, roses, and figures, whose faces had been worn smooth by time. Beyond it stretched a fortress larger than any castle Scarlet had ever seen. Towers had been cut directly into black rock. Bridges crossed deep ravines. Hundreds of blue flames burned without smoke. This was not a barbarian camp. It was a kingdom. Armored figures appeared along the walls. Some looked human, though they were taller and broader than ordinary men. Others stood in wolf form beside them. The gate guards reached for their weapons when they saw Scarlet. Then the grey wolf stepped forward. A ripple of recognition passed through the soldiers. One of them dropped to one knee. Another whispered, "Commander Garin." The grey wolf's body shifted. Bone and muscle moved beneath its fur. In seconds, the beast became a tall, scarred man, wearing dark leather armor. His molten eyes remained unchanged. Scarlet stumbled backward. He caught her arm before she fell, but released it the moment she flinched. "You are safe," he said. His voice was the same rumble she had heard in the forest. Scarlet stared at him. Garin looked at her scar, then at the medallion. "Where did you get that?" "It belonged to my mother." His expression sharpened. "What was her name?" Before Scarlet could answer, the fortress bells began to ring. Not an alarm, a summons. Every lycan in the courtyard turned toward her. A silver-haired woman pushed through the gathering crowd. She wore no armor, only layered grey robes and a belt filled with glass bottles. Her amber eyes took in Scarlet's blue lips, torn feet, and thin white dress. "Get her inside," the woman ordered. Scarlet tried to speak, but the courtyard tilted. She collapsed before she reached the steps. When Scarlet woke, warmth surrounded her. She lay beneath layers of thick fur in a chamber carved from dark stone. A fire roared in the hearth, and steam rose from a copper bowl beside the bed. The silver-haired woman sat nearby, crushing dried leaves with a stone pestle. "You are fortunate," she said without looking up. "Another hour in that dress, and you would have lost your feet. Scarlet pushed herself upright. Where am I? The healing wing of Veriel. My name is Mara. Scarlet glanced toward the door. The wolves brought me here. They brought you to the king. Fear tightened her chest. Mara noticed. If King Rowan wanted you dead, child, Commander Garin would not have carried you through half the fortress in his arms. Scarlet looked down. Her white gown had been replaced by a soft wool shift. The medallion rested on a table beside the bed. Next to it stood Beatrice's brown medicine bottle. Mara picked it up. How long have you been taking this? Since I was 7. My stepmother said it would soften the scar. Mara's mouth hardened. This does nothing for scars. Scarlet stared at her. It suppresses appetite, weakens the muscles, and slows the body's natural healing, Mara continued. Used often enough, it keeps a healthy person tired, pale, and dependent. The room seemed to grow colder despite the fire. Scarlet thought of every morning Beatrice had stood over her until she swallowed. Every time Scarlet had believed her weakness was proof that she was broken. She knew. Scarlet whispered. Someone knew exactly what this mixture would do. Mara placed the bottle aside. Then her gaze settled on the scar along Scarlet's face. Her expression changed. Who gave you that mark? I do not know. I was attacked as a child. Mara leaned closer but did not touch her. That is not a rogue's bite. Scarlet's pulse quickened. What is it? Before Mara could answer, the chamber door opened. Commander Garin entered wearing formal black armor. The king has returned, he said. Mara rose. She is not strong enough. He has already scented her. Garin looked at Scarlet with an emotion she could not identify. Shock, perhaps, or reverence. The entire court is waiting. Scarlet's hands tightened around the furs. For what? Garin's golden eyes dropped to her scar. To learn why the Beast King's mark is on the face of a human woman. The great hall of Veriel was silent when Scarlet entered. Mara had wrapped her in a dark wool gown and a heavy cloak, but her legs still trembled as Garin escorted her between rows of Lycan warriors. No one mocked her scar. That should have comforted her. Instead, their silence felt like the moment before a storm. At the far end of the hall stood a throne forged from black iron and ancient weapons. A man sat upon it. Rowan Valehart was larger than any human Scarlet had ever seen. Long black hair fell over his shoulders. Scars marked the skin above his armor, and his silver eyes seemed to catch every blue flame in the room. He did not look like a mindless beast. He looked worse. He looked completely controlled, a creature powerful enough to destroy anything, yet disciplined enough to choose when. Garin bowed. My king. The bride from House Arrington survived the border. Rowan's gaze moved to Scarlet. His expression was cold at first. Then he inhaled. The massive king went perfectly still. Scarlet's heart slammed against her ribs. Rowan rose from the throne. Every Lycan in the hall lowered their head. He descended one step, then another. His eyes never left Scarlet's face. Not her body, not her white human hands. Her scar. Scarlet fought the instinct to cover it. Rowan stopped halfway down the stairs. His silver eyes widened, and in a voice so quiet the entire hall strained to hear, the Beast King spoke a name Scarlet had not heard since her mother died. Winter Rose. Winter Rose. The name crossed the great hall like a breath from a buried grave. Scarlet had not heard it since childhood. Her mother used to whisper it while brushing her hair, claiming winter roses were strongest because they bloomed when every gentler flower had died. Rowan descended the remaining steps. Scarlet forced herself not to retreat, though every instinct screamed that a predator was closing in. The king stopped within arm's reach. Up close, he was overwhelming, broad shoulders armored in black steel, hands marked by old battles, silver eyes fixed on the scar she had spent 14 years hiding. Look at me, he said. Scarlet's hand rose toward her cheek. Rowan saw the movement and immediately stepped back. The entire hall seemed to notice. I will not touch you without permission, he said, his voice quieter, but I need to see the mark. It is already visible. Not to shame you. Something in his expression frightened her more than anger would have. Grief. Scarlet slowly lowered her hand. Rowan studied the scar from her temple to the place where it vanished beneath her collar. His breathing changed. The control that had made him terrifying began to fracture. Then the Beast King lowered himself to one knee. Gasps swept through the hall. Scarlet staggered backward. "My king," Garen said. Rowan ignored him. He looked up at Scarlet as though she were the only person in the room. "You covered me with your blanket," he said. "You were 7 years old, standing in a blizzard, and you tried to save a dying wolf." Scarlet stopped breathing. Snow, blood, a huge black shape beneath the trees. A memory she had always believed was a nightmare. "You were there," she whispered. Rowan's eyes closed briefly. "I have been looking for you ever since." Scarlet remembered the ambush in broken pieces. Her mother screaming for the driver to turn back, horses collapsing in the snow, men in dark cloaks surrounding the carriage. Then the wolf. It had been wounded, black blood staining the white ground. Scarlet had climbed from the wreckage with her small wool blanket and thrown it over the beast, believing anything that bled could still be saved. "When the others came back, you stood in front of me," she said. Rowan rose slowly. "They were rogues, but they did not find your carriage by accident. Someone drove them toward that road. One attacked me. I killed it." Scarlet touched the ridge across her cheek. "And this?" Pain moved through Rowan's face. "I turned too quickly. My claw caught you while I was pulling you away from its jaws." The truth struck harder than any insult. Her scar had not been left by a monster trying to destroy her. It had been made by a protector trying to save her. Rowan extended one hand but stopped before reaching her. "The mark did not create the bond between us," he said. "It is only how I recognized the child I thought had died. What I felt when you entered this hall is something else." Scarlet's pulse quickened. "What?" Every wolf in the chamber had gone motionless. Rowan's silver eyes flashed briefly gold. "My wolf knows you." Scarlet took another step back. Rowan's hand dropped at once. "No law of Variel will force you to accept me," he said. "You will not be married, marked, or touched without your consent. You called me Winter Rose. That was your scent when you were a child. It disappeared before I could find you." Scarlet thought of Beatrice's bitter medicine. Someone had not merely hidden her face. They had hidden every trace that might have led Rowan to her. The council erupted the moment Rowan declared Scarlet under royal protection. She arrived under a human treaty, Lord Varric argued from the lower benches. "We do not know whether she carries poison, magic, or false papers." "She arrived half-frozen," Garen snapped. "Her own escort abandoned her. That does not make her queen." "I did not ask to be queen," Scarlet said. The hall fell silent. Varric looked surprised that she had spoken. Scarlet tightened the cloak around herself. "I was sent here because my father expected me to die. Whatever bond your king believes exists, I have not agreed to it." Rowan's jaw hardened, but he did not contradict her. Varric turned toward him. "You hear her, my king. The human rejects the claim." "She rejects nothing," Rowan said. "She is asking for time and truth." Scarlet looked at him. No one in her family had ever translated her fear into something that preserved her dignity. Rowan faced the council. "Until she chooses otherwise, Lady Scarlet is a protected guest of Variel. Any person who approaches her without permission answers to me." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Scarlet's shoulders stiffened. Rowan noticed. He corrected himself before she could speak. "And to her." That small change moved through the room more powerfully than a roar. Mara stepped beside Scarlet and examined her pale face. "She needs rest." Scarlet did not move. "Before I leave," she said, "I want to know why you believed I was dead." Rowan's expression darkened. "Because the official border report named one survivor from your mother's carriage." Scarlet waited. The report said that child died 3 days later. Before Rowan could say more, the doors of the great hall opened. A human envoy entered beneath a white banner, escorted by 4 Lycan guards. He carried a sealed declaration bearing Cedric Arrington's crest. The envoy bowed stiffly. "I bring a formal petition from the Duke of the Northern Marches." Rowan remained beside Scarlet rather than returning to his throne. "Read it." The envoy broke the seal. "Lord Cedric acknowledges that Lady Scarlet was delivered under the Winter Treaty. However, he contests any claim, oath, marriage, or transfer of property made in her name." Scarlet's stomach tightened. The envoy continued. "The Duke asserts that years of illness have left his eldest daughter incapable of independent legal judgment. He further alleges that Lycan bonding rights may be impairing her will." Murmurs spread through the hall. Scarlet understood the trap immediately. Cedric was not claiming Rowan had stolen her. He was claiming Scarlet did not possess the mind to choose anything for herself. The envoy lowered the document. "Until her competence is judged by the royal court, Duke Cedric demands that Variel recognize him as the sole legal authority over Lady Scarlet Arrington and every right attached to her blood." Rowan's eyes turned gold. A growl shook the stone beneath Scarlet's feet. But Scarlet was no longer looking at the Beast King. She was looking at her father's seal. Cedric had sent her north to die. Now that she had survived, he intended to erase her while she was still breathing. Scarlet woke the next morning to find 3 gowns arranged beside the hearth. One was silver, one midnight blue, and one plain dark wool. Mara stood by the window. "The king sent a royal seamstress." Scarlet touched the wool gown. "Why 3? He asked that you choose." The answer unsettled her more than a command would have. A tray waited near the bed with bread, eggs, broth, and sliced apples. Nothing had been touched or tasted on her behalf. No servant hovered to ensure she ate. Even the guards outside stood far enough away that their shadows did not cross her door. Rowan had listened. That did not mean she trusted him. When Scarlet entered the council chamber later, she wore the plain wool gown and left her scar uncovered. Rowan rose from the head of the table. Several council members did the same, though Lord Varick remained seated. "I am told your people are calling me the king's mate," Scarlet said. Rowan's expression tightened. "Some are." "Stop them." A murmur moved around the table. Varick gave a humorless laugh. "You would command our king's court?" Scarlet looked directly at him. "I would command what I am called." Rowan held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to the chamber. "Until Lady Scarlet chooses another title, she will be addressed by her name." Varick's yaff hardened. Rowan gestured to an empty chair beside him, but Scarlet selected one farther down the table. She saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. He did not object. For the first time in her life, Scarlet made a choice in front of powerful men, and no one punished her for it. That did not make Variel safe, but it made safety seem possible. The council's first dispute concerned food. Variel's western villages had received only half their winter grain, and the merchants blamed avalanches along the southern road. Garin recommended seizing the next caravan by force. Scarlet studied the documents while the council argued. 3 manifests carried different merchant seals, but the handwriting was identical. The weights had also been altered after inspection. "Your grain is not trapped behind an avalanche," she said. The chamber quieted. Varick folded his arms. "And you know this because?" The wagons were weighed at Iron Pass before the reported storm. Scarlet placed 2 pages side by side. They were already light when they crossed the border. Rowan leaned closer. Scarlet pointed to the tax marks. "These merchants belong to different companies on paper, but every payment passes through the same clearinghouse in the Northern Marches." "Owned by whom?" Garin asked. "Officially, no one. In practice, my father." Varick's eyes narrowed. "You accuse your own blood without proof?" "I accuse numbers. They are less sentimental than people." A few councillors exchanged surprised looks. Scarlet continued. "Cedric is creating an artificial shortage. Variel either pays double for replacement grain or raids the caravans. If you raid them, he calls you savages and demands military support from King Aldous." Rowan's gaze sharpened. He profits whether we starve or attack. Yes. What would you do? No one had ever asked Scarlet that in a room where her answer mattered. Send no soldiers, she said. Send auditors to the independent border mills. Compare their records to the manifests. Then buy directly from the eastern farms before Cedric's agents reach them. Rowan looked toward Garin. Do it. Varric rose. You would change our winter strategy on the advice of a human who arrived yesterday? Rowan did not look away from Scarlet. I would change it on the advice of the only person in this room who found the theft. That afternoon, Rowan granted Scarlet access to the Royal Archives. The library occupied 3 levels beneath the mountain, its walls carved with treaties, battle records, and family lines older than Ethelgard itself. Scarlet moved slowly between shelves while Rowan remained several steps behind. You do not need to follow me, she said. I know. Then why are you? Because I've spent 14 years believing you were dead. Scarlet stopped. That explains why you want me guarded. It does not give you the right to make me feel watched. Rowan's shoulders went rigid. After a moment, he stepped back toward the entrance. I will wait outside. Scarlet had expected an argument. His obedience left her with nowhere to place her anger. She searched until dusk, following the winter rose symbol through brittle documents. At last, she found an ancient border treaty signed by Rowan's grandfather and a woman bearing her mother's family name, House Everwyn, not Arrington. The document described the Everwyn line as wardens of the northern marches and guardians of the crossing between human lands and Variel. Scarlet traced her mother's crest. Rowan returned only when she called his name. Did you know her? Scarlet asked. Your mother contacted Variel shortly before she died. Why? She wanted to reopen the border and end the raids. Scarlet looked at him sharply. My father said Lycan rogues murdered her. Rogues were there, Rowan said. But someone led them to her road. Scarlet closed the treaty. And the brides? Rowan went still. The women your kingdom believes you devoured, she said. What happened to them? His silence lasted too long. Scarlet's fragile trust shifted. Some were not brides, Rowan said at last. They carried blades, poison, or orders to murder me in my sleep. And the others? I cannot answer without endangering people who are still alive. You expect me to trust you while you hide the truth. I expect nothing from you. Then stop looking at me as though fate has already decided what I will become. Pain flashed across his face, but Scarlet did not soften. A knock sounded at the archive door. Garin entered, snow melting across his armor. We found one of the men from her escort. Scarlet rose quickly. Alive? Garin's expression answered before he spoke. The soldier's body lay outside the southern watchtower. His throat had been cut with a human blade. Inside his coat, the guards found part of a letter bearing Cedric's private seal. Most of the page had been soaked with blood, but one sentence remained legible. No witness must reach the royal court. Scarlet stared at the words until they blurred. Rowan stood beside her, close enough to offer warmth, but not close enough to touch. Your father is killing everyone who knows what happened at Bloodwood, he said. Scarlet folded the letter carefully. No, she replied. Her voice no longer shook. He is killing everyone who can prove I was never meant to survive. The Eastern Mill records arrived 2 days later. Scarlet spread them across the council table beside the ancient treaty she had found in the archives. Rowan stood across from her while Garin and 3 councillors watched in silence. The numbers confirmed the grain theft, but the final page contained something more dangerous. Every shipment passing through the northern marches carried a warden's levy. The seal beside it did not belong to House Arrington. It was the same wolf and rose symbol Scarlet wore around her neck. House Everwyn, Scarlet whispered. The elderly royal archivist nodded. Your mother's bloodline governed the marches for 6 centuries. The title could pass through marriage, but ownership could not. Scarlet looked at the document. Then how did Cedric keep control after she died? He became regent for the surviving heir. Varric leaned forward. There was no surviving heir. Human records state the child died. Scarlet raised her eyes. The archivist opened another volume. Variel received that notice 14 years ago, yet an internal trade document from Iron Oak Keep lists Lady Scarlet Arrington as a dependent of the Duke. 2 versions of her life: dead when Rowan searched for her, alive when Cedric needed her blood. Scarlet pressed her fingertips against the table. If I was the heir, his regency should have ended when I came of age. Yes, the archivist said, unless you were legally declared incapable. Cedric's petition suddenly made perfect sense. He had not begun calling her incompetent after she survived Variel. He had been building that lie for years. Rowan's expression turned lethal. Scarlet closed the record before he could speak. No armies, she said. His silver eyes met hers. Not yet, she added. If we attack now, he destroys the documents and calls this like an invention. Rowan's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. As you decide. That evening, Rowan asked Scarlet to meet him in a quiet chamber beneath the western tower. A human woman waited there. She appeared to be in her early 30s, dressed in the simple green clothes of a healer. A thin scar circled one wrist where a chain had once rested. My name is Adelaide Moreau, she said. 7 years ago, Ethelgard sent me north as the Beast King's bride. Scarlet stared at her. You are supposed to be dead. I know. Adelaide glanced at Rowan. My brother's life was used to force me into carrying poison. I was ordered to pour it into the king's wine on our wedding night. What did Rowan do? He smelled the poison before I reached the cup. Adelaide's mouth curved without humor. I begged him to kill me before my family could learn I had failed. Instead, he sent wolves south, freed my brother, and gave us new names. Scarlet looked at Rowan. Why hide her? The men who sent her still held power, he said. If they knew she lived, they would hunt her. And the other brides? 2 were assassins. One died before reaching my border. Another vanished from her escort and was blamed on Variel. Adelaide stepped closer to Scarlet. The king saved me, but he also allowed the world to believe he had devoured me. Rowan did not defend himself. I thought fear would stop them from sending more women, he said. Did it? Scarlet asked. His silence answered. No, he said at last. It made their sacrifice easier to explain. Scarlet had expected excuses. Instead, Rowan faced the ugliness of his choice without looking away. I cannot change what my silence allowed, he said, but I can tell the truth now if Adelaide chooses to stand beside it. Adelaide lifted her chin. I have been waiting 7 years to do exactly that. Later, Scarlet found Rowan alone on the battlements. Snow moved through the night in thin silver sheets. He held a faded bundle of wool in both hands. I kept this, he said. Scarlet recognized the blanket before he unfolded it. The blue thread along the edge had been sewn by her mother. Scarlet touched the worn fabric. You carried it all these years? It was the only proof that you had been real. Rowan's voice roughened. I remembered a child who saw a bleeding animal and ran toward it when every adult had fled. I never remembered you as weak. Scarlet looked down at the blanket. My family told me I caused the attack, that my mother died because she stopped to save me. Rowan's eyes flashed gold. They lied. They lied so often that sometimes their voices sound like my own. He moved one hand toward her, then stopped. Scarlet saw the restraint in him, the effort it took for a man accustomed to taking action to wait for permission. Slowly, she lifted her hand. Her fingertips touched the scar crossing his palm. Rowan stopped breathing. This came from that night? She asked. Yes. Scarlet traced the pale line once. Then she took his hand and placed it gently against the unscarred side of her face. Not the scar. Not yet. But she did not flinch. Rowan closed his eyes as though the small act had broken something inside him. When Scarlet released him, he did not follow. For the first time, distance between them felt like a choice rather than a wall. The next morning, Garin entered the council chamber carrying a blood-stained leather book. We intercepted a courier near the southern pass. Inside the ledger were payments made 14 years earlier from Cedric's private treasury. The recipients were listed as hunters. But Garin had identified 3 names: rogue handlers, men known for trapping starving wolves, drugging them, and driving them toward chosen roads. Scarlet read the date: 3 days before her mother's carriage was attacked. "This proves he hired them," Rowan said. "It proves he paid them," Scarlet replied. "He will claim it was border defense." A sealed letter fell from the back of the ledger. This one was addressed to Scarlet. She broke the wax. The message contained only 4 lines. "Return to Iron Oak Keep before the next full moon. Renounce every claim connected to your mother. Submit to a royal physician's judgment, or Elspeth Mallory will hang for stealing ducal property and conspiring with Variel." Scarlet's fingers went numb. Rowan read over her shoulder. "Who is Elspeth?" "The woman who gave me my mother's medallion. The only person in Iron Oak Keep who had risked everything to preserve the truth." Rowan reached for his sword. Scarlet caught his wrist. "No." His eyes burned. "He has taken someone you love." "Yes," Scarlet said, "because he expects you to become the monster everyone already believes you are." She folded the threat and slipped it into her sleeve. "This time, we do not give him the story he wants." Scarlet entered the war room before sunrise and found Rowan's generals gathered around a map of the northern marches. Black markers covered the southern roads. 3 Lycan companies had already been ordered toward the border. Rowan stood at the center of the table in full armor. "You are preparing to invade," Scarlet said. Every conversation stopped. Rowan dismissed the council with one look. Garin hesitated, then followed the others out and closed the doors. "I am preparing to recover Elspeth," Rowan said. "With 600 soldiers? Cedric controls the roads, the garrison, and the keep. He also controls the story the Southern Court hears." Scarlet placed his troop orders on the table. "The moment your army crosses the border, he will announce that the Beast King has broken the treaty. I will not leave your friend to hang. Neither will I. But you made this decision without me." Rowan's expression hardened. "Because you would offer yourself in exchange. I would consider every option." "That is not an option." Scarlet stared at him. "You do not decide that." His wolf flashed gold behind his eyes. "I nearly lost you once. I will not stand aside while Cedric sets another trap." Scarlet turned toward the door. 2 royal guards stood outside. There had been one the night before. She looked back at Rowan. "You doubled my guard for your protection and ordered them not to let me leave the fortress." His silence confirmed it. Scarlet felt something inside her grow painfully still. "Cedric kept me in a tower because he believed I was worthless," she said. "You are keeping me in a fortress because you believe I am precious. Those are not the same. The reason is different. The lock is not." Rowan flinched as though she had struck him. Scarlet opened the door. The guards moved to block her. She looked at Rowan. For one terrible moment, he said nothing. Then he ordered them aside. Scarlet walked out without looking back. By afternoon, the entire fortress knew the king and his intended mate had quarreled. Scarlet knew because servants suddenly avoided her eyes and because the title she had forbidden appeared on a council notice posted outside the archive. Future Queen of Variel. She tore the notice from the wall. Lord Varric found her holding it. "I did not authorize this," Scarlet said. "No," Varric replied. "The king did." Her anger shifted from heat to ice. "Why?" "To prevent the council from returning you to your father while your legal status is disputed." Scarlet looked at the words again. Rowan had used a crown as a shield. He had still placed it on her head without asking. That evening, she entered the council chamber alone. Rowan sat at the far end of the table, the strain of sleeplessness carved into his face. Scarlet laid the torn notice before him. "You promised I would choose what I was called. I was trying to secure your protection. You secured your claim." His gaze sharpened. "I have made no claim you cannot refuse. You declared me your future queen in writing, because Cedric is trying to prove you belong under his authority. So you answered by placing me under yours." Rowan rose. The table between them suddenly seemed too small. "I love you." The words struck with brutal force. Scarlet's breath caught, but she did not step back. You barely know me. I know enough. No. You know the child you searched for. You know the mate your wolf recognized. You know the woman you want to protect. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. Do you know the woman who may choose a path you hate? Rowan did not answer. Scarlet's eyes burned. I escaped one family that decided my life had value only when it served them. I will not live in a golden cage because the man holding the key calls it love. She left him standing beside the throne he had tried to place beneath her. The attack came after midnight. Scarlet woke to smoke, slipping beneath her door. She crossed the room and reached for the handle, but stopped when she saw a thin cord tied across the threshold. A warning bell had been disabled. Someone had wanted her to rush blindly into the corridor. Scarlet moved to the window instead. The courtyard below was empty, too empty. She remembered the fortress plans she had studied while tracing the old grain tunnels beneath Variel. The royal chambers had once connected to an emergency passage used during sieges. The entrance lay behind the hearth. Scarlet pulled aside the iron screen and found a carved stone marked with the old warden's symbol. Heat scorched her fingers as she pressed it. A section of wall opened. Before entering, she grabbed the metal water pitcher and emptied it across the bed curtains. If the fire spread, the damp cloth might buy time for whoever came searching. The passage descended into darkness. Footsteps followed behind her. Scarlet did not run. She waited at a narrow turn until a masked man entered, then swung the metal pitcher into his face. Bone cracked. He fell, and Scarlet seized the dagger from his hand. A second attacker appeared. Before he reached her, a black wolf crashed through the passage and drove him into the stone. Rowan shifted back into human form with blood on his hands and murder in his eyes. Alive, Scarlet ordered. His claws were already at the assassin's throat. Rowan looked at her. Then, with visible effort, he pulled his hand away. The attacker carried a merchant token from the same clearinghouse Cedric used to steal Variel's grain. Rowan dismissed the guards after the prisoner was taken. He remained in Scarlet's damaged chamber but did not approach her. I was wrong, he said. Scarlet watched him carefully. I thought fear gave me the right to decide for you. He removed the royal signet from his hand and placed it on the table. It does not. He handed her 3 documents. The first cancelled the troop movement. The second revoked every restriction on her travel. The third granted Scarlet authority over Variel's response to Cedric's threat. You may leave, Rowan said. You may refuse the bond. You may claim the marches without marrying me. My soldiers will protect the choice you make, not the choice I want. Scarlet looked at the papers. You believe that now because I survived tonight? No. His voice broke slightly. I believe it because I finally understood that protecting your life while taking your freedom would still destroy the woman I love. For once, Rowan did not ask her to forgive him. He bowed and walked away. Garin arrived moments later, carrying an item taken from the captured assassin, a sealed packet addressed to Cedric. Inside was a copied letter written in Scarlet's mother's hand. She read it beneath the scorched ceiling. Cedric has discovered my intention to end his regency when Scarlet comes of age. If anything happens to me on the Northern Road, the original covenant in the Royal Archive will prove my daughter's right and expose the men who conspired against us. Scarlet read the final line twice. The copy was evidence of motive, but the original covenant, the document capable of destroying Cedric's legal claim, remained in the Royal Archive of Ethelgard, and Cedric now knew exactly where it was. Scarlet called the War Council at dawn. This time Rowan did not stand at the head of the table. He took the chair to her right and waited. Scarlet placed her mother's letter beside a map of Iron Oak Keep. Cedric knows the original covenant can destroy his regency. He will either burn it or replace it with another forgery. Garin studied the southern roads. Then we reached the Royal Archive before his men. If Lycan soldiers enter Ethelgard without permission, the archive will not matter, Scarlet said. Cedric will call it an invasion. Lord Varric folded his arms. And your solution? We send humans. Scarlet pointed to an abandoned monastery east of Iron Oak Keep. Elspeth was scheduled to be transferred past it before her execution. Cedric expected Scarlet to charge toward the castle or Rowan to cross the border with an army. He would not expect a small group disguised as grain merchants. Captain Alaric may still be alive, Scarlet continued. The dead soldier carried only part of Cedric's order. Alaric has the rest. Rowan's jaw tightened at the captain's name. Scarlet looked at him. I need Garin, 6 scouts, and Adelaide. No royal banners, no open weapons. You intend to go? Yes. Every instinct in Rowan's body seemed to resist. Scarlet watched him confront the fear in silence. Finally, he asked, What role do you want me to have? The question mattered more than agreement. My ally, she said. Not my jailer, not my king. You follow my plan, and if I order you to stop, you stop. Rowan Valehart. You have my word. 3 nights later, Scarlet returned to the southern lands hidden beneath a merchant's hood. The grain convoy reached the ruined monastery shortly before midnight. Garin's scouts positioned themselves among the trees while Adelaide drove the lead wagon. Rowan traveled beside Scarlet without armor, though no plain cloak could disguise the danger in the way he moved. Hoofbeats sounded along the frozen road. 4 guards appeared around a barred prison cart. Elspeth sat inside with her hands chained, her grey hair loose around a bruised face. Scarlet's control nearly broke. Rowan felt it. His hand moved toward hers but stopped before touching. Scarlet closed the distance herself and gripped his fingers once. Wait for my signal. The convoy blocked the road as though a wheel had broken. Adelaide climbed down and began arguing with the lead guard. While the soldiers were distracted, Scarlet slipped behind the prison cart. Elspeth. The old woman lifted her head. For one breath, she looked at Scarlet as if she were seeing a ghost. Then she smiled through split lips. I knew the wolves would have better sense than your father. Scarlet worked a stolen key into the lock. A shout came from the road. One guard had recognized Garin. Steel flashed. Scarlet opened the cage as Rowan moved between the soldiers and the cart. He disarmed the first man without killing him. The second raised a crossbow toward Scarlet. Rowan caught the bolt in his shoulder. His eyes turned gold. The soldier froze. Scarlet saw the wolf rise inside him, demanding blood. Rowan. He looked at her. Alive. His breathing came hard. Then he broke the crossbow in half and struck the man unconscious. He had kept his promise when violence would have been easier. The attack lasted less than a minute. Inside the guard's satchel, Garin found execution orders bearing Cedric's seal. Elspeth carried something more valuable. Sewn inside the lining of her dress was the original letter Scarlet's mother had written before the ambush. Elspeth also knew where Cedric had hidden the only surviving witness. Captain Alaric had never returned to Iron Oak Keep. Cedric's men had imprisoned him in an abandoned customs house after he refused to sign a statement claiming wolves had killed Scarlet. They found him before sunrise. Alaric was thinner than Scarlet remembered, one eye swollen shut, but he recognized her immediately. My lady, he whispered. You left me at Bloodwood. Shame hollowed his face. I did. Why should I believe anything you say now? Because I was a coward then. His chains rattled as he sat straighter. And because your father will kill me whether I speak or remain silent. Alaric revealed the second order Cedric had given him. It instructed the escort to abandon Scarlet at the border, report her death, and destroy all copies after returning. He had hidden the original beneath a floor stone when Cedric's agents captured him. By the time they returned to Variel, Scarlet possessed 3 pieces Cedric could not easily dismiss. Her mother's original warning, Alaric's written order, Elspeth's testimony that Cedric had falsified Scarlet's legal incapacity for years, but the covenant itself remained in the royal archive. We have enough to create doubt, Scarlet said in the council chamber. Not enough to remove him. Adelaide stepped forward. Then I will testify too. Scarlet looked at her. If Cedric wants the Southern Court to believe Rowan devours brides, Adelaide said, they can hear the truth from one of the dead. Rowan's face darkened with old regret. Adelaide did not spare him. You will admit your silence helped create the lie. Yes, Rowan said. No defense. No command. Only responsibility. Later, Scarlet found him alone in the courtyard, removing the broken crossbow bolt from his shoulder. Blood darkened his shirt. You should have gone to Mara. She would lecture me. She would be right. Scarlet took the cloth from his hand and cleaned the wound. Rowan remained perfectly still. You obeyed me on the road, she said. I gave you my word. You wanted to kill him. Yes, but you stopped. Because you asked me to trust your judgment. Scarlet tied the bandage. For days, she had waited for Rowan's apology to become another promise he would break when afraid. Instead, he had let her lead. He had taken a weapon meant for her. He had spared men he despised because their living testimony mattered to her plan. Rowan. He turned. Scarlet placed one hand against his chest. If I tell you to stop now, will you? Immediately. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. Rowan did not seize her. He did not deepen the kiss until her fingers curled into his shirt and pulled him closer. Only then did his hand settle carefully at her waist. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. This does not make me your queen, Scarlet whispered. Her faint smile touched his mouth. No, it does not mean I have accepted every part of the bond. I know. It means I chose this. His silver eyes softened. That is the only meaning I want. The royal summons arrived the following morning. King Aldis had agreed to hear Scarlet's claim before the full court of Ethelgard. Cedric had also agreed to attend. Too easily. Scarlet studied the message, while Garin searched the royal seal for tampering. A second scrap of paper had been hidden beneath the wax. It came from a servant inside Iron Oak Keep loyal to Elspeth. Cedric had ordered his household guards not to protect him during the hearing. He had dismissed his personal healer, and he had rewritten his will to describe his death at Rowan's hands as the final proof of Lycan treachery. Scarlet read the warning aloud. Silence settled across the chamber. Rowan understood first. He does not expect to defeat your claim. No, Scarlet said. Cedric had spent his life controlling the story. Now, if he could not remain a hero, he intended to die as one. He wants you to kill him in front of the Southern Court. Rowan's eyes turned cold. Scarlet folded the summons. Then we will make certain he survives long enough to hear the truth. The royal court of Ethelgard had been built to make ordinary people feel small. White marble columns rose toward a painted ceiling crowded with saints and dead kings. Noble families filled the galleries in silk and gold, whispering as Scarlet entered beneath the eyes of the realm that had forgotten her. Rowan walked beside her, without armor. He had agreed to leave his sword outside the chamber. Even so, soldiers tightened their grip on their spears as he passed. Cedric stood before the throne in mourning black. He looked older than he had at Iron Oak Keep, but no less controlled. When he saw Scarlet, grief transformed his face with such perfection that several nobles lowered their eyes in sympathy. My daughter, he whispered. Scarlet stopped beyond his reach. Cedric turned toward King Aldis. You see what the Beast King has done. She no longer wears her family colors. She arrives, surrounded by wolves, and speaks through documents they placed in her hands. I will speak for myself, Scarlet said. Cedric's sorrowful expression did not shift. That is precisely the danger, Your Majesty. My daughter has suffered since childhood. Her judgment has always been fragile. The words struck old wounds, but Scarlet remained standing. King Aldis leaned forward. Lady Scarlet, did King Rowan compel you to come here? No. Did he use a mating rite, threat, or enchantment to control your will? No. Cedric sighed as though her answers proved his concern. Scarlet removed the veil folded inside her cloak and placed it on the marble floor. My father spent 14 years telling the world I was too damaged to be seen. Now he says I am too damaged to speak. She faced the galleries. I came because he built his authority on my silence. Today, that silence ends. Elspeth entered first. Bruises still marked her face, but her voice carried through the chamber as she described the false medical reports Cedric had ordered after Scarlet came of age. One declared Scarlet incapable of managing property. Another claimed she suffered delusions caused by the childhood attack. The physician whose name appeared on both documents had died 6 years before either report was written. Cedric smiled faintly. A servant's accusation. Captain Alaric was brought forward next. He placed Cedric's private order before the king. "I was commanded to abandon Lady Scarlet at Bloodwood," he said. "I was to report that Variel killed her, whether I witnessed her death or not." Cedric's attorney rose. "A confession from a disgraced coward facing execution. Then perhaps you prefer the Duke's own seal," Scarlet said. The order passed through the royal clerks. Cedric did not look at it. He looked at Rowan. "You brought a monster into this court and expect us to debate handwriting?" A side door opened. Adelaide Moreau stepped into the hall. Recognition spread slowly through the nobles. Her portrait had once hung in the palace chapel among women supposedly murdered by the Beast King. A dead bride had returned. Adelaide described the poison hidden in her wedding chest, the men who threatened her brother, and the Lycan king who spared them both. Then Rowan stepped forward. "I allowed your kingdoms to believe I killed her," he said. "Fear protected my borders, and I told myself that was enough." The court stirred. "It was not," Rowan continued. "My silence helped powerful men turn women into disposable weapons. That failure is mine." Scarlet saw Cedric's confidence flicker. He had prepared to fight a beast who denied everything. He had not prepared for a king willing to confess his own guilt. Scarlet placed her mother's letter before King Aldis. The royal archivist compared its seal with the covenant recovered that morning from a hidden drawer beneath the old warden records. The document confirmed what Cedric had spent years concealing. Northern marches belonged to the Everwyn bloodline. Cedric had served only as regent. His authority should have ended on Scarlet's 21st birthday. King Aldis's face hardened. "Duke Arrington, how do you answer this?" Cedric finally abandoned the grieving father. His eyes became cold. "My first wife intended to hand the border to wolves," he said. "She would have weakened Ethelgard for the sake of peace." "You arranged the attack," Scarlet said. "I protected the realm." The admission silenced the chamber. Scarlet's throat tightened, but she refused to look away. "You murdered my mother. She chose treason." "And me?" Cedric's gaze moved over her scar without disgust. "Only calculation. You survived." For the first time, Scarlet understood completely. He had never feared her face. He had feared the name and power behind it. Cedric stepped closer. "I made you believe you were worthless because a worthless girl never claims a throne." A blade flashed beneath his sleeve. He did not strike Scarlet. He drove it toward Rowan. Rowan caught his wrist before the steel reached his chest. The sound that tore from him was not human. Claws broke through his fingers as he forced Cedric to his knees. The nobles screamed. Guards raised weapons. Cedric smiled through the pain. "There," he gasped. "Show them what you are." Rowan's claw hovered above his throat. One strike would end him. One strike would also give Cedric the death he had designed. "Rowan." Scarlet's voice cut through the chaos. His golden eyes found her. "Let him live." Every muscle in Rowan's body shook. Cedric whispered, "She will never be safe while I breathe." Rowan tightened his grip. Then he released him. Cedric collapsed onto the marble, alive and stripped of his final victory. "Arrest him," Scarlet said. This time, the royal guards obeyed her. King Aldis rose as Cedric was dragged away. By blood, covenant, and lawful succession, Scarlet Everwyn Arrington is recognized as Warden of the Northern Marches. The galleries erupted, but the Chief Royal Justice lifted the restored covenant. There remains one question. The room quieted again. The Warden must hold the marches independently. She may swear no oath that places the border beneath a foreign crown. All eyes turned toward Rowan. Then toward Scarlet. The justice continued. If Lady Scarlet is already bound as Queen of Variel, her claim may transfer the northern marches to Lycan rule. Rowan stepped away from her. She is not my queen, he said. Pain struck Scarlet before she understood. Then Rowan lowered his head. Not unless she chooses to be. The court waited for her answer. Scarlet looked from the Chief Justice to Rowan. Only hours earlier, Cedric had tried to reduce her life to two choices: remain beneath her father's authority or surrender herself to the Beast King. Now the royal court offered the same prison in more elegant language. Choose the marches, or choose the man. Scarlet stepped toward the restored covenant. Read the final article, she said. The Chief Justice frowned. Lady Scarlet. Read it. King Aldous gave a reluctant nod. The justice unrolled the document. When conflict rises between the Southern Crown and Variel, the warden shall owe military obedience to neither. The northern marches shall remain a sovereign passage under Everwyn blood until peace is restored. Whispers surged through the galleries. Scarlet faced the throne. My mother did not intend to hand Ethelgard to wolves. She intended to prevent either kingdom from owning the border between them. King Aldous' expression tightened. That clause has not been enforced for generations, because my father buried it. Scarlet placed her palm over the Everwyn seal. I claim the northern marches under the original covenant. I will swear to defend its people, roads, and laws. I will not surrender it to Ethelgard, Variel, or any husband. The Chief Justice looked toward Rowan. And if you marry the Lycan king, then he marries the warden of an independent territory. He does not become its ruler. Every eye turned toward the Beast King. Rowan did not hesitate. I accept her sovereignty. Scarlet held his gaze. For the first time, no one else's law stood between them. Cedric's trial lasted 9 days. The testimony exposed more than one murdered duchess and one stolen inheritance. Merchants confessed to manufacturing shortages along the border. Royal officers admitted accepting Arrington gold to alter records. Physicians revealed that Beatrice had paid them to describe Scarlet as unstable without ever examining her. Cedric lost his title, his estate, and every honor attached to his name. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in a royal prison, where his version of history could no longer command armies. Beatrice was stripped of rank and removed from Iron Oak Keep. Her involvement in the false medical reports and the tonic used to keep Scarlet weak was made public before the same society whose approval she had worshipped. Rosalind stood alone when the judgment ended. Without silk, servants, or her mother's protection, she looked younger than Scarlet remembered. What will happen to me? She asked. Scarlet could have sent her north as a political hostage. She could have arranged a marriage to some cruel lord and called it justice. That was what Cedric would have done. You will receive no Arrington fortune, Scarlet said. You will hold no title taken from my mother's blood. Rosalind's face whitened. But you will not be traded, imprisoned, or punished for crimes you did not commit. You may leave and build a life of your own. Why? Scarlet thought of the balcony, the mocking laughter, and every time Rosalind had watched her suffer. Because I know what it means to have someone else decide your worth. Rosalind lowered her eyes. It was not forgiveness. Scarlet did not owe her that. It was simply the end of the family's tradition of turning daughters into payment. When Scarlet returned to Iron Oak Keep, no one ordered her to use the servant entrance. The gates opened beneath the Everwyn banner, a silver wolf, encircled by winter roses. Tenants, soldiers, millers, and servants filled the courtyard. Many had known her only as the veiled daughter in the Eastern Tower. Now they watched as she dismounted in a midnight blue coat with her dark hair braided away from her face. Her scar remained completely visible. Elspeth waited at the foot of the steps. Scarlet embraced her before the entire household. Then she entered the great hall and removed Cedric's portrait from above the central hearth. In its place, she hung the restored painting of her mother wearing the warden's medallion. The first laws Scarlet signed ended the fraudulent grain levies and reopened direct trade with Variel. The second established legal protection for any woman sent across a border under a marriage treaty. No bride could be transferred without appearing before an independent magistrate and declaring her consent. Adelaide became the first advisor appointed to enforce it. As winter deepened, human wagons traveled north under Lycan protection, while varial healers and metalworkers crossed south without hiding their faces. The border did not become peaceful overnight. Too much blood had been spilled for that. But for the first time in generations, the road through the northern marches carried more grain than soldiers. And no one called Scarlet the ruined daughter again. On the night of the first winter council, Rowan waited for Scarlet on the battlements. Snow covered the mountains, but winter roses bloomed in stone planters along the wall, their dark red petals bright against the white. Representatives from Veriel and Ethelgard stood in the courtyard below, waiting for the warden to seal the new alliance. Rowan Valehart. When Scarlet approached, he lowered himself to one knee. The first time he had knelt, instinct and recognition had driven him. Scarlet had been freezing, terrified, and unable to understand why a king looked at her scar with reverence. This time, he bowed before a woman who knew exactly who she was. "I will not ask you to belong to me," Rowan said. "I ask whether you will allow me to stand beside you as your mate, your husband, and your equal." Scarlet looked at the man who had once tried to protect her by closing every door around her. He had learned to open them instead. "I do not need a king to give me a crown," she said. A quiet smile touched his mouth. "I know. I do not need a wolf to fight every battle for me. I know that too." Scarlet held out her hand. "But I choose you, Rowan Valehart." He took her hand only after she offered it. When he rose, he stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her. Below them, humans and Lycans bowed as one. The wind lifted a loose strand of Scarlet's hair, revealing the full white line across her cheek. She did not cover it. Once, the scar had been used as proof that she should remain hidden. Now it shone beneath the winter moon like the first stroke of a crown. Rowan had bowed because fate recognized her. Scarlet took his hand because she chose him. Opaline Mere wedged her silver expansion ruler through the last courtyard chain as the developers hammered the lock shut. Behind her, patrols drove families into narrow tenement restraint rooms, one door after another closing before moonrise. A child cried for his mother's hand. A man struck the inside wall once, not in anger, but because his shoulders were already broadening. Then a shadow tore beneath the plaster. 3 black claws stretched across the floorboards under a wall no wolf had touched. Opaline's breath stopped. A claw shadow formed only when a registered shifting body lacked enough legal expansion space to transform without structural contact. So which wall would fail first? "Step away from the gate," the patrol captain ordered. "If I step away, you lock hundreds into rooms that are already too small." The last communal moonshift courtyard of Lower Vosmere lay behind her, a square of white moonstone paving surrounded by tenement walls. For 30 years, families had shifted there under open sky, not comfortably, not beautifully, but with enough room for shoulders, spines, paws, grief, and breath. Now the gate bore a royal sail seal and a fresh notice printed in silver ink. Vosmere Glass Arcade, luxury retail redevelopment, surplus municipal land. Surplus, Opaline thought, while 300 registered bodies waited for moonrise upstairs. Commissioner Harlan Dace walked through the workers as if the hammering were music arranged for his entrance. His coat was immaculate. His smile was kind in the way locked doors sometimes called themselves protection. "Miss Mere," he said, "your affection for obsolete courtyards has been recorded." "My measurements have been recorded," she said. "Your permit allows survey, not obstruction. My oath requires obstruction when design becomes injury." A second door slammed above them. The man inside struck the wall again. This time, plaster dust slipped from the ceiling and landed on Opaline's dark auburn hair. Harlan glanced at the dust and then at the developers. "Finish the lock." Opaline drove the ruler deeper through the chain links. The moon rose over the roofline. The claw shadow widened. Patrols looked down at it, then away. because magic that warned before bloodshed was less convenient than blood that could be filed afterward. Those rooms were certified, Harlan said. By whose plan? By the Royal Moonshift Zoning Office. Your office. His smile thinned. Approved indoor restraint is modern safety. Courtyards invite disorder. They invite space. Hooves clattered at the end of the street. Royal riders split the crowd, and Kieran Voss dismounted beneath the arcade banner. He was broad-shouldered in a black city coat with silver moon and brick clasps, his ice-blue eyes lit by the wolf glow he did not bother to hide. A white scar crossed his left cheekbone, pale against rich golden-brown skin. Opaline knew his signature before she knew his voice. It lay on the sale notice like a hand across a throat. "What is happening?" Kieran asked. Harlan stepped forward. An architect is frightening residents with superstition and blocking a lawful safety transition. Opaline lifted the ruler. A claw shadow is not superstition. It forms when a registered shifting body lacks legal expansion space. No claw touched that wall. Kieran followed her gaze. The shadow stretched under the plaster again, longer now, 3 hooked points reaching into the hall as if a wolf trapped behind stone were trying to draw a map. "Open the room," Opaline said. Harlan's head turned sharply. "Private shift restraint rooms cannot be opened during moonrise." "Then measure through the door." Kieran gave one nod. "Measure." The patrol captain stepped aside only because the king had spoken. Opaline knelt at the threshold of room 12. The door gap showed a woman's skirt, a child's bare foot, and an iron wall ring polished by use. She slid the silver ruler along the floorboards. 8 feet, 9 inches clear, she said. Harlan's clerk checked his slate. Certified single adult room. There are 3 people breathing inside. The woman behind the door whispered, 4, if my mother counts. The clerk lowered his stylus. Opaline looked at Kieran. Legal minimum for one adult registered shifter is 12 feet clear, not including ring radius, bed bolt, or door swing. Shared family shift needs open court or 26 feet clear. Harlan said, "Old attack records prove courtyards are unsafe. My sister's broken ribs prove legal rooms can still be cages." Kieran's gaze snapped to her. Attraction had no place there, but recognition did, unwanted and immediate. He had the face of a man realizing the paper he signed had weight. "You sold their breathing room," Opaline said. "Do not call it safety because the lock is polished." The wall behind room 12 groaned. Then plaster dust sifted from 2 adjoining buildings. A second claw shadow slid beneath the bakery tenement. A third stretched under the laundry stairs. 3 separate walls, 3 rooms, untouched by any wolf. The shadows joined at Opaline's boots. The locked courtyard behind her seemed suddenly larger than the street, and every chain across it sounded like a sentence already passed on the living before trial even began. The 3 joined claw shadows did what Harlan's certificates could not. They made every closed door sound like a countdown. A crack ran under the first tenement window, thin as thread and bright with moon dust. Inside, someone groaned through a restraint gag. Opaline knew the sound too well. A shifting chest held down by straps until bone had to choose between bending and breaking. "Unlock the courtyard," she said. Harlan stepped between her and the gate. "If residents are released into open space, any injury becomes your disorder. If they remain in those rooms, any injury is your design." Kieran's eyes flashed silver, but he did not order the chain broken. "Get healers to the doors." "To the doors is not through them," Opaline said. Harlan spread his hands toward the watching buyers and patrols. "Your Majesty, one architect's fear cannot overturn an approved safety transition." "No," Opaline said. "Measurements can." She crossed to room 12 again. The woman inside had stopped whispering. That frightened Opaline more than crying. "May we open 6 inches?" she asked through the door. "No patrol will enter. No one will touch you." Kieran reached for the latch. Opaline caught his sleeve before his glove met iron. "Ask. Do not perform mercy like ownership." The hallway went very still. Kieran lowered his hand. Will you allow the door open 6 inches? No patrol inside unless you invite them. A hoarse voice answered, "Open." The door moved. Moon heat rushed out with the smell of iron, sweat, and crushed plaster. A young man's shoulder had broadened against a wall ring bolted too low. His arm was half shifted, claws buried in the boards not from threat but from trying not to scream. His mother pressed both hands against his ribs to keep him from twisting. "Unhook the lower ring," Opaline said. The patrolman hesitated. Kieran's voice cut cleanly. "Do it." The ring opened. The young man sagged forward, and the shadow beneath the wall shortened by one claw. Residents saw it. Harlan saw it. Kieran saw it. "Not panic," Opaline said. "Space." She moved fast before Harlan could bury the moment. The baker's wife brought a chalkboard from her shop. 2 elders stood beside it and counted only what residents consented to give: room number, clear width, number of shifting bodies, injury seen, obstruction found. The midwife recorded wounds without private shift histories. Opaline fixed the silver ruler's edge at every threshold and called each number aloud. Room 14, 9 feet clear after bed bolts, 4 registered adults. Room 21, 7 feet after restraint cot, 2 adults and an adolescent. Room 30, false storage wall occupied by a grandmother whose registration had been moved to a shelter she had never entered. Harlan's clerk whispered, "The plan says unoccupied storage." "The plan is lying," Opaline said. A patrolman reached for her tool case. Unauthorized evidence collection. Kieran stepped between them. No tool leaves her hand. Harlan's smile tightened. "Your Majesty, allowing street measurements will inflame residents." Panic did not draw those shadows. The sentence held the hallway for one breath. Opaline did not forgive him for it, but she used it. She drew 3 columns beneath the chalkboard heading: body count, clear span, wall contact. "No family names," she told the elders. "No private forms. If Harlan wants shame, he can bring his own ink." The baker's wife wrote with a steady hand. A little boy carried plaster chips in a cup, each marked with the room number where it had fallen. Opaline sealed them beneath paper strips and resident thumbprints before any royal clerk could rename the damage again. By midnight, the measurement station spread across the street outside the sealed courtyard. Chalk marks covered boards and paving stones. Children carried scraps of paper. Residents who had been ordered silent pointed to walls, rings, narrowed corners, and doors that opened inward against bodies needing outward space. Each witness mark made the official plan smaller. Then a family tried to cross the gate. The father's arm had shifted first, fur dark along the wrist, fingers caught between human and claw. He had pulled his daughter from room 21 when the wall groaned, and now the courtyard chain held him at the threshold like a cruel joke. A patrolman raised a fine slate. Unauthorized exit during moonshift. Kieran took the man's chain in both hands and loosened it from the father's arm. "Void that fine," Harlan said. "Case by case mercy cannot overturn certified safety." The fine slate was turned face down, not destroyed. Opaline noticed the difference. So did the father. The courtyard remained locked. She knelt beside the pressure map anyway, because anger was not measurement until it learned where to stand. The claw shadows did not scatter randomly. They followed cellar walls, stair foundations, old drainage lines, and the new arcade pilings marked on Harlan's plan. The longest shadow ran beneath the sealed gate, crossed the moonstone courtyard edge, then angled under the bright Vosmere glass arcade banner. Opaline laid the silver ruler across that line. "What is it?" Kieran asked. She looked from the locked courtyard to the foundation stakes shining under moonlight. "The worst pressure does not begin in the rooms," she said. "It begins under the place they are building your arcade." By morning, the claw shadow map had dried under brick dust and sleepless hands. Opaline kept it folded beneath her coat as Harlan's men arrived with red closure boards. They nailed public safety notices over the tenement doors and ordered residents to remain available for approved relocation interviews. The courtyard chain stayed locked. The arcade banner fluttered above it, bright as a promise made to someone wealthier. Kieran stood beside the gate with Rook at his heel. The royal wolf was blue-black, enormous, silver-white at the throat, with ice-blue eyes and a narrow white scar across the left muzzle. He sniffed once toward the restraint rooms, then turned his head away and planted himself in the open air of the courtyard threshold. "He knows," Opaline said. Kieran looked at the wolf before answering. "He will not enter rooms too small for a lawful shift." "Then listen to him better than your commissioner listened to me." Harlan unrolled a polished inspection schedule. "The block is unstable because residents panicked under Miss Mere's encouragement. The king will inspect the approved restraint model, the arcade foundation line, and then the shelter transfer route. Not private rooms, not rumor." Opaline stepped in front of the first stairwell. "If this inspection happens, it happens by boundary." Harlan's brows lifted. "Another performance." She faced Kieran, not him. "You may keep patrols back. You may order doors opened only when residents consent. You may hold the hall clear. But you do not enter private restraint rooms, question anyone's shift control, touch injury marks, or turn my measurements into royal ownership. The proof stays with resident witnesses." Kieran's gaze did not leave hers. "Accepted. And Rook stays outside unless a resident invites him." Kieran turned to the patrol captain. "You heard her." The hallway seemed to inhale. They began with room 14. The mother inside allowed the door open but kept her sons behind a hanging quilt. Opaline measured from plaster to bedbolt to wall ring, ring to door swing. The official plan showed 12 feet clear. Her ruler found 9, then 8 where a new pipe chase narrowed the corner. The claw shadow under the wall thickened when one son shifted his shoulder against the quilt. "No names," Opaline said as Harlan's clerk lifted his slate. "Only dimensions, occupancy count by consent, and structural contact." The clerk hesitated. Kieran said, "Write it her way." That did not heal the sale. It changed who controlled the next fact. In the second room, decorative panels hid a crack running behind the plaster, the line fine and deep where moon pressure had traveled into the stair foundation. Opaline slid a copper measuring bracelet from her wrist and hung it against the crack. It trembled. "This wall is carrying force into the arcade pilings," she said. Harlan smiled. "Old plaster trembles when frightened people stamp." A woman with her arm in a sling laughed from the doorway. "My plaster did not break my shoulder. Your ring did." Kieran looked at the sling. Opaline lifted a hand before he could ask anything too private. "Injury testimony only if she chooses." The woman nodded once. "Wall ring caught my shift." Healer wrote panic bruising. Opaline marked the phrase exactly, because lies often wore tidy medical words. Harlan hurried them toward the approved model room across the arcade foundation. It was wide, whitewashed, and empty except for a padded restraint frame set at a careful angle. No family had ever slept there. No cooking shelf narrowed it. No grandmother's trunk blocked a turn. No child's cot stole 3 feet of legal space. "This is the certified design," Harlan said. "Observe." A hired shifter entered behind a privacy screen and pulled against the restraint frame at moon-simulated strength. The walls held. No claw shadow appeared. Harlan's clerks looked relieved too quickly. Kieran's face hardened with uncertainty. "Opaline?" She walked the model room once without touching the shifter or the screen. Her ruler showed legal width. Her bracelet did not tremble. Her first proof had nothing to bite. Then she knelt at the baseboard. The nailheads were new, too new for a certified room supposedly built before the sale review. A hairline seam ran behind the lower panel, and moonlight caught a pale shaving of fresh wood. "This room is braced," she said. Harlan's voice sharpened. "All safe rooms require bracing. Then why are these braces hidden from the plan?" She looked to Kieran. "Open the foundation viewing hatch." Harlan stepped close. The hatch is restricted. Kieran did not move toward Opaline. He moved toward the lock. "Open it." The hatch lifted onto a crawl space smelling of lime, sawdust, and new money. Thick brace posts stood behind the model wall, angled into the arcade foundation like secret ribs. None appeared on the certified plan. Across the alley, the real tenement walls had no such bones. Kieran stared down into the crawl space. After the riot, I wanted every shift counted, every door known, every dangerous body contained before fear spread. Bodies are not dangerous because they need room, Opaline said. I know that now. It was not enough. But he said it where residents could hear. As Harlan ordered the hatch closed, an old plaster mason brushing dust from his apron passed Opaline and pressed a splinter of pale wood into her palm. From behind that wall, he whispered, installed last night. The splinter stayed warm in Opaline's palm long after the mason vanished into the stairwell. She did not show it to Harlan first. Proof that reached power before witnesses could become decoration, denial, or ash. She wrapped the pale wood in a strip torn from her field paper, marked it with the mason's thumbprint in plaster dust, and asked the sling-armed woman and 2 elders to watch the seal. Kieran stood at the edge of the resident circle, not inside it. What changed? The model room did not prove restraint safety, Opaline said. It proved someone knew the walls needed help. Harlan laughed softly. All architecture needs support. Then the support belongs on the plan. They carried the splinter to the old courtyard archive room, a narrow municipal office now half emptied for arcade surveyors. Opaline laid out the original courtyard plans, tenement wall load notes, healer injury summaries copied overnight, and the certified model room drawing. Her copper bracelet trembled over the injury map before it trembled over the floor plan. Broken ribs near wall rings, shoulder dislocations beside low restraint angles, claw shear wounds where bodies had met plaster before expansion finished. Same pressure line, she said, different words. Kieran read one healer summary, then another. His jaw tightened. These were reported as panic injuries. They were space injuries, Opaline said. Harlan opened the office door wider, inviting patrols, buyers, and arcade clerks to see him appear patient. If Miss Meir doubts the approved room, we will demonstrate it publicly. Noon, full load, no secrecy. Opaline knew the trap before he finished. He would test the reinforced room because it could hold. The crowd would see his wall survive and hear her warning called fear. No residents in the test, she said. Harlan's brows rose. Afraid? Done risking bodies for your theater. Kieran looked at Harlan. Mechanical load only. Architect witnesses. At noon, the model room filled with spectators. Arcade investors stood beneath glass renderings. Patrols formed a line between residents and the open floor. A padded restraint frame was pulled by iron weights and moon tension straps until the wall groaned like a body resisting pain. The wall held. No claw shadow appeared. A murmur ran through the crowd. Harlan turned to Opaline with almost gentle satisfaction. Certified containment protects the city. For one moment, Opaline's own proof looked like it had abandoned her. The ruler showed legal span. The wall load needle remained below failure. The crowd saw safety, not the secret ribs taking the force. Kieran's eyes found hers across the room. He did not rescue her with rank. He waited, and that waiting carried a question instead of command. Opaline stepped to the baseboard, removed the lower panel. Harlan snapped. The test is complete. Then the wall should not mind being seen. Kieran ordered the panel removed under resident witness. Behind it, angled brace posts locked into the arcade foundation, thick enough to carry pressure the tenements had been forced to bear alone. Opaline placed the mason's splinter against one fresh cut. The grain matched. The saw mark matched. The smell of new pine resin rose in the noon heat. Last night's brace, she said. Not certified design. Staged survival. Harlan recovered fast. Temporary reinforcement for demonstration clarity. You used a false room to sell real confinement. The crowd shifted. Not enough to collapse him, enough to make him dangerous. Kieran spoke quietly, but everyone heard. After the old moon riot, I dragged 3 civilians out from under a fruit stall, while shifted men fought patrols in the street. I was 19. I believed open space meant chaos. Containment looked merciful because it gave fear walls. Opaline saw the scar on his cheek whiten as he said it. There was truth there. There was also damage. My sister was 26 when a legal restraint room broke 3 ribs, she said. She begged the inspector not to lock the door the next moon. He told her compliance saved lives. Now she sleeps with furniture away from every wall. Kieran closed his eyes once. I am sorry. Be sorry after the doors open. He nodded, accepting the boundary in front of everyone. Harlan did not. By late afternoon, his clerks posted a notice suspending Opaline's access permit for inflammatory interference with approved moonshift safety. Patrols began moving families from damaged rooms into emergency restraint chambers below the arcade foundation, narrower than the rooms already measured. Developers covered the courtyard gate with silk for the next evening's opening. Opaline was barred from the threshold she had spent 5 years protecting. Her ruler, maps, and witness seals were declared inadmissible until commissioner review. She did not leave. The plaster mason found her near the stacked arcade crates, hands shaking but voice steady. You wanted stock marks. He showed her a delivery stamp burned into the end of a brace beam. Vosmere Glass Arcade, Structural Batch 7, purchased 6 weeks before the courtyard safety review. Opaline fitted the splinter to the stamped beam. Same wood, same cut, same hidden wall. The staged room had been built from arcade stock before the courtyards were ever declared unsafe. Harlan's suspension notice reached Opaline before sunrise, nailed to the courtyard post over her own chalk marks. Access revoked, tools inadmissible, resident interviews prohibited pending commissioner review. Behind the notice, the last communal courtyard had been wrapped in silk for the glass arcade opening. White fabric hid the old moonstone paving as if beauty could make stolen space innocent. Workers tightened new chains through the gate bars while families watched from windows above rooms that had already hurt them. Opaline tore the notice down and folded it into her evidence case. A patrolman reached for her wrist. Suspended architects cannot handle official postings. Then record that a suspended architect can still read. Kieran arrived before the patrolman could decide whether pride required force. He wore the same black city coat, but the sleeplessness around his ice-blue eyes made him look less like a king painted on a coin and more like a man standing inside the shape of his own mistake. Harlan says your permit is under review, he said. Harlan says many things before measuring them. I can place you in a royal safe house until the hearing. Opaline looked past him to the silk-covered gate. A private refuge for me while residents are moved into smaller rooms. His silence answered too slowly. No, she said. If I am safe and they are locked in, you have only decorated the harm. The words struck him. He did not reach for her. He turned to the patrol captain instead. No one touches her evidence without a resident witness. Harlan came down the arcade steps smiling. Generous, Your Majesty, but irrelevant. Miss Meir has no access authority. That morning, his clerks began emergency transfers. Families from cracked tenement rooms were marched beneath the arcade foundation into temporary restraint chambers with lower ceilings, iron floor hooks, and no windows. The chambers smelled of new lime and old fear. One grandmother refused the stairs until patrols threatened shelter removal. A baker's adolescent son, still bruised from the wall ring, asked if he would be allowed to stand this time. No one answered him. Opaline answered with work. She set her table across the public street, outside the boundary of Harlan's revoked authority. The plaster mason signed his testimony beside the brace splinter and the arcade stock stamp. 2 healers came hooded at first, then uncovered their faces when the sling-armed woman stood with them. They brought injury accounts copied from night books, broken ribs recorded as panic, dislocated shoulders called non-compliance, claw shear wounds labeled restraint abrasion. Names by consent, Opaline said. Patterns by proof. She preserved the model room test as well, because failed proof could still testify if kept whole. The iron weights, moon tension strap marks, baseboard nails, and brace shaving were logged separately under resident seals. Harlan's demonstration had not disproved her warning. It had shown exactly how much hidden support a room needed before it could pretend to be safe. Kieran watched the table grow. "Tell me what to order." "Nothing that turns my challenge into your favor," Opaline said. "Keep patrols from breaking custody. Keep residents from being punished for witness marks. Do not make yourself the doorway." He nodded once. "Then I hold the street open." It mattered. It did not open the courtyard. Kieran stood beyond the table with Rook at his side. The wolf refused the arcade stare, blue-black body angled toward the open air. His silver-white throat fur bristled whenever a transfer door shut below the foundation. Harlan's callers moved through the street by noon. Public safety warning. Unauthorized architectural panic endangers tonight's arcade opening. Approved restraint chambers remain the safest option for full moon order. Opaline filed her public safety challenge before the old ward bell, sealing it with architect, healer, mason, and resident witness marks. It demanded immediate reopening of the courtyards, suspension of emergency chambers, and public comparison of real room dimensions against certified plans. Kieran read it under the arcade banner. "This is enough for an emergency halt," he said. "Then halt it." He looked toward Harlan's posted authority. The sale seal, the auction transfer, the investors arriving in polished carriages. "If I void this site without the public comparison, Harlan will call every injury caused by resident disorder and every measurement your bias." Opaline understood the tactic. She hated that understanding did not open a door. "Your sale still gives him the keys," she said. "Yes. He is using them tonight. Yes. No excuse, no plea, no promise that his regret could stand where legal space should have been." At dusk, the glass arcade lamps were lit. Music rose over the street while residents were locked beneath it. Buyers admired the silk-covered courtyard gate. Harlan spoke from a marble step about modern safety, efficient land, and a city freed from old fear. Then the moon lifted over the banners. A claw shadow appeared beneath the first emergency chamber door. Then another. Then 50 more, stretching black and enormous through cellar stone, stair walls, and tenement floors. Every shadow reached toward the courtyard chains, as if the buildings themselves were begging for the space Harlan had sold. The first scream came from under the arcade foundation. Music still played above it. Opaline was already running before the silver trays stopped moving. The claw shadows had become a black river across the cellar stones, each enormous talon reaching toward the chained courtyard gate. Beneath the glass arcade, restraint doors shook in their frames while investors turned pale under the new lamps. Harlan lifted both hands. "Remain calm. This is precisely why containment exists." A crack answered him. It climbed the nearest tenement wall from cellar window to second floor, splitting plaster through the painted moon safety seal. Dust poured over residents trapped behind doors that opened inward. Opaline seized the chain at the courtyard gate. "Keys!" Harlan stepped in front of the lock. "No unauthorized release during active moon shift. Those rooms are failing. They are controlled rooms. If you break them open, you create public disorder." Another wall groaned. Someone below cried, "My mother cannot breathe." Opaline looked at Kieran. For one suspended second, she saw the old answer rise in him. Guards, rank, command, protection shaped by possession of the scene. Then his jaw set around a different cost. "Patrols under Architect Mear's safety direction," he said. "Now." Harlan's face hardened. "Your Majesty, she is suspended." Then unsuspend survival. Kieran cut the first patrol line himself, but he did not take the gate. He stepped aside and held the street clear. Opaline drove her silver expansion ruler through the chain gap and used the old hinge pressure instead of brute force. "Pull outward on my count. No crowd rush. Families by chamber number. Healers at the court edge. No one questions shift form." The chain snapped on 3. Moonlight fell into the courtyard like water released from a cistern. The first residents stumbled up from the emergency chambers, shoulders broadening, spines bending, faces half human with pain and terror. Patrols flinched. "Do not stare them into shame," Opaline snapped. Mark clear span from wall to wall. Keep paths open. Rook stood outside the stair mouth, blue-black body low, silver-white throat bright under the moon. A young woman trapped between shift and breath reached one shaking hand toward him. Wolf, stay. Kieran's eyes moved to Opaline. She invited him, Opaline said. Rook entered only far enough to block the patrols from pressing forward, then lay down in the open approach, heavy paws tucked, making himself a barrier instead of a threat. The claw shadows changed. Where residents crossed into the courtyard, the enormous talons broke apart under their feet, shrinking into ordinary moon shapes on old white stone. Men and women who had been clawing walls moments before dropped to knees, hands, paws, whatever shape the moon demanded, and breathed because the air had room for them. Opaline did not let relief slow her. East chambers next. Move the cots away from door swing. Cut wall rings only after the resident is braced. Harlan shouted from the arcade step, loud enough for buyers to hear. She is releasing unstable shifters into a public opening. Any injury now belongs to her. A patrol captain, trained too long to obey commission seals, blocked the east stair. Commissioner's order, hold residents inside until register clearance. The wall behind him bowed outward. Opaline ran toward it. Move! He hesitated. The tenement split. Brick burst above the east stair, and a woman fell through a wash of plaster with a child clutched against her chest. Kieran caught the child before he hit stone. The woman's shoulder struck the broken lintel with a sound Opaline felt in her teeth. For one terrible moment, the claw shadow under that wall became a whole black paw, spread wider than the room that had held her. Then residents in the courtyard reached back, not as a mob, as witnesses with space. They formed a living arc, leaving the center open, hands extended only where invited. Opaline guided the injured woman across the threshold. Do not pull her arm. Support ribs. Let the shift finish if it must. The woman crossed the gate line. The black paw shadow shattered into 5 thin strips and dissolved. Everyone saw it. Harlan saw it too. He turned on Kieran. This is riot exposure. You remember what happens when bodies change in streets. Kieran looked at the injured woman, the child in his arms, the cracked wall, and the open courtyard that had saved the next breath. I remember fear making walls look merciful. Opaline caught his gaze only long enough to place the child in a healer's arms. Then hold the patrols back. He did. Kieran stood between Harlan's officers and the courtyard with empty hands, ordering no resident touched, no injury slate altered, no witness removed. When Harlan's clerks tried to seize Opaline's measurement board, Kieran broke the commissioner's wax from their custody packet and handed the board back to the baker's wife, who had held it since moonrise. Resident witness holds resident proof, he said. Opaline marked the open zones. North court clear, west court clear, east stair damaged, arcade foundation load active. The claw shadow still crawled beneath unopened rooms, but every person who reached the old white stone pulled the darkness smaller. The crowd had gone silent. Above them, the glass arcade's polished dais cracked across its marble lip. A line ran from the emergency chambers, through the tenement wall, toward the platform where Kieran had been meant to bless the sale. Harlan stepped back from the spreading fracture. The wall split toward the royal dais. But in the open courtyard behind Opaline, the claw shadows kept shrinking wherever residents found room to stand. The fracture reached the royal dais before Harlan could step off it. Marble split under the place where Kieran had been meant to bless the sale. Glass lanterns swung above investors' heads, throwing bright pieces of moonlight over the crowd. Beneath the arcade floor, the emergency chambers groaned again, and a fresh row of claw shadows dragged themselves toward the opened courtyard like trapped things finding air. Opaline climbed onto the cracked dais with her silver expansion ruler in one hand and the resident map in the other. Clear the platform, she said. No speeches over a load line. Kieran moved first, lifting the injured child's blanket from the edge and handing him to a healer before stepping down. He did not tell her to be careful. He made room for her to be heard. Harlan seized that moment. You see? Miss Mere has turned an orderly opening into structural panic. The courtyards are provoking public shifts. Opaline pointed to the shrinking shadows on the old white stones. The courtyard is ending them. Residents stood inside the open space, some half-shifted, some human again, all breathing with distance around their bodies. Wherever they stood clear of walls, the claw shadows broke apart. Wherever doors remained locked below the arcade, black talons thickened under brick and plaster. Live comparison, she said. Same moon, same residence, different space. The words struck harder than accusation because every person there could look and measure. She sent Mason teams to the model room first. They removed the lower panels under resident witness. Hidden brace posts, still smelling of new pine, locked the demonstration wall into the arcade foundation. The plaster mason held up his sign splinter and fitted it to a fresh cut. Installed last night, he said. I was paid to close the panel before noon. Harlan's face went still. A paid laborer can be paid to lie. Opaline opened the brace stock crate herself. Then the wood can testify. The stamp on the beams read, Vosmere Glass Arcade, Structural Batch 7, purchased 6 weeks before the courtyard safety review. The certified restraint plan showed no braces. The real tenement walls had none. The model room had survived because Harlan gave theatre stronger bones than he gave families. A low sound moved through the residence. Kieran stood beside the evidence, silent and white around the mouth. Opaline did not pause for his remorse. She called the healers next. One by one, they laid copied injury accounts on the cracked dais. Broken ribs marked as panic bruising. Shoulder dislocations listed as non-compliance. Claw shear wounds renamed restraint abrasion. The sling-armed woman stepped forward without hiding. The injured mother from the east stair stood with one arm braced, her child pressed against her skirts. My wall ring caught before my shift finished, the mother said. The room did not hold me, it held me down. A second resident spoke from the courtyard edge. They moved us out before Old Moon nights, then wrote that attacks stopped because courtyards closed. Another added, my father's injury happened in a restraint room. The report called it courtyard aggression. Harlan lifted both hands. A frightened crowd produces memory that serves its fear. Opaline laid the altered floor plans across the dais, then set the real measurements beside them. Fear did not subtract 3 feet from room 14. Fear did not hide a wall ring behind storage. Fear did not send bidders courtyard maps before the safety review. Kieran looked up. Bidders? The baker's wife brought the auction packet Opaline had protected under resident custody. Inside were property bids for all 3 courtyards, dated before Harlan's public report declared them surplus. Beside them lay restraint supplier contracts promising chamber expansion, iron rings, and emergency shelter conversions for the same blocks. Profit first, Opaline said. Safety later. Harlan's smoothness finally cracked. Urban land must serve the living city, not old rituals. Then why did your living city need false plans, hidden braces, suppressed injuries, and locked doors? The arcade answered with another sharp break. A decorative glass arch split, raining harmless glitter across the abandoned investor chairs. Rook growled from the courtyard threshold, but did not enter the residence space. His blue-black body held the patrols back, while residents moved injured neighbors into open moonlight. Opaline placed her ruler across the spreading floor crack. It matched her pressure map from the night before. Emergency chambers, cellar wall, stair foundation, arcade piling, royal dais. The claw shadows had not caused the fracture. They had warned where confined bodies were forcing contact through walls never built to receive them. The system failed exactly where the map said it would, she said. Kieran removed the moonstone signet from his glove. The motion quieted buyers, patrols, residents, and Harlan at once. I sold the Moonshift courtyards, he said, voice carrying across the cracked arcade. I accepted restraint rooms as safety because containment looked measurable, profitable, and calm from above. I allowed Commissioner Harlan Dace to convert bodily safety into redevelopment land. Harlan whispered, "Your Majesty." Kieran did not look away from the residents. "I dismissed architects, healers, and families who knew that a shifting body needs space, not shame. My sale locked people into rooms that broke them." He set the signet on the resident map, not over it, beside it. "The courtyard sales are void. The glass arcade transfer is suspended. Harlan Dace is removed from Moonshift Zoning Authority and held for public charge. Compulsory indoor restraint is ended pending resident and field review. No injury slate, occupancy plan, bid packet, or supplier contract leaves this street without resident witness." No one cheered. Several residents wept as if relief itself had weight. Kieran turned to Opaline only after he had named the harm. "You were right. This does not ask your forgiveness." "No," Opaline said. "It gives us walls to repair." By dawn, every emergency chamber stood empty. The courtyards were open, white stones scuffed by frightened feet and safe moonlight. The claw shadows had dissolved where residents could stand clear, but the tenements remained cracked, one stair condemned, 3 families displaced, and the injured still waiting on stretchers. Beyond the gate, the glass arcade sign hung crooked over land that had never been surplus. Opaline folded the resident map and felt victory become a debt. 3 days after the arcade cracked, Opaline refused to meet in the palace. The first repair council gathered in the largest reopened courtyard, not under chandeliers or carved wolves. Residents sat on borrowed benches between chalked expansion circles. Healers kept stretchers at the shaded wall. Masons propped split stair mouths with timber. Children traced the old moonstone paving with fingertips, as if proving it was still allowed to belong to them. Kieran stood outside the circle until the baker's wife pointed to an empty crate. "Witnesses can sit." He sat. Opaline opened the ledger herself. No compensation promise counts until the injured name, the injury, the displaced name, the loss, and the payment leaves royal custody. Harlan's old clerks had been replaced by ward recorders chosen by residents, healers, architects, and field patrols. Each entry required 2 witnesses who did not work for the crown. Broken ribs became broken ribs again. Dislocations became dislocations. Panic bruising was struck through wherever it had hidden wall contact. 3 displaced families were assigned temporary homes before noon, with rent paid directly to them, not to landlords waiting for favors. The condemned east stair was closed under Mason authority, not police authority. Its families received relocation keys and repair stipends before anyone touched the broken brick. Kieran signed every order where Opaline placed it. He did not speak over the list. Courtyard sales voided. Arcade transfer cancelled. Auction deposits returned from royal funds, not resident funds. Restraint supplier contracts terminated for fraud. Emergency chambers dismantled. Iron wall rings removed from occupied homes, unless a resident requested one as a voluntary aid. Public apologies posted in every ward where injury reports had been altered. At dusk, Opaline walked through the lower arcade foundation with the new safety board. The glass stalls were empty now, stripped of silk and investor ribbons. Mason lamps showed where hidden brace posts had carried theater strength into a false wall, while tenements carried fear. "These chambers are not to be converted," Opaline said. "They are to be open to air, inspected, and recorded as failed design." A young field patrol woman wrote that down. A healer added, "And no medical report may be recoded without patient review." "Good," Opaline said. By the end of the week, the first permanent code change was nailed to the courtyard gate. Legal moonshift safety would be measured by clear expansion space, open routes, resident consent, and wall load evidence, not by how tightly a body could be held. Indoor restraint could never be compulsory. No commissioner, landlord, king, or developer could sell communal shift space without approval from a resident, architect, healer, and field patrol board. Kieran signed the transfer of royal zoning power in public. This time, his moonstone signet did not stamp a sale. It stamped his own limit. Rook lay beyond the gate, blue-black fur dark against the stones. silver-white throat lifted to the evening breeze. Children watched him from inside the courtyard. He did not come closer until a little girl with plaster on her sleeve whispered, "You can stay there." So he stayed there, exactly where invited. Only after the last compensation slate was marked paid did Kieran ask Opaline to walk. Not in the palace garden, not beneath arcade glass. He waited outside the lower courtyard gate with no patrol line behind him and no carriage ready to take her anywhere. The white scar across his cheek was pale in the moonlight. "I confused containment with care," he said. "It let me feel useful without trusting the people most at risk." Opaline rested one hand on the repaired gate. "You also confused authority with knowing." "Yes." "And regret with repair, at first." "Yes." She looked past him to the courtyard. Families were gathering for the first voluntary moon shift since the sales were voided. Chalk circles marked clear space. Masons had braced real walls in plain view. Healers waited beside open doors. No silk hid the stone. No chain crossed the gate. Her sister stood near the west wall, not touching it, breathing carefully while a young niece laughed at the moon. Opaline felt the old wound inside her loosen, not vanish. Some injuries became honest before they became healed. "I am not choosing you because you were sorry," she said. Kieran nodded. "I know. I am choosing one walk because the courtyard is legal again. The boards hold authority. The injured have payment. The reports are reopened, and every door behind me is open." His eyes shone with the wolf light he kept inside his human face. "Then one walk is more than I deserved." "It is not about deserve." She opened the gate herself. "It is about what I freely want." He waited until she stepped out before he moved beside her. Behind them, the moon rose full over the restored courtyards. Bodies changed in open air without shame. The last claw shadows stretched once beneath the repaired walls, thin and uncertain, then broke apart in the safe white light. Opaline did not look back until Kieran stopped at the gate. He remained outside the courtyard line, hands empty, waiting. She smiled, small but certain, and invited him in.